Today, we're diving into a landmark legal ruling that completely changed the game for thousands of Filipinos all over the world. Let's get right into it. Okay, picture this. You get legally divorced in one country. You think you're free, you're ready to move on with your life. But then you go back home to the Philippines and find out you're still legally married to your ex? Sounds impossible, right? Well, for a very long time, this was the confusing and painful reality for so many Filipinos. So let's unpack the incredible case that finally stood up and challenged this legal contradiction. At the heart of this entire legal saga is one person, Marilyn Manalo. Her story is the perfect, and I mean perfect, example of how a tricky legal rule can create a deeply personal and complicated mess. So here's the deal. Marlon Manalo, a Filipino citizen, was married to a Japanese national, Yoshino Minoru. Back in 2011, a court in Japan officially granted them a divorce. So under Japanese law, she was single. But back in the Philippines, the law still saw her as a married woman. Talk about a legal paradox. That's exactly what she was trapped in. So what do? Naturally, she went to a Philippine court to get her divorce recognized. But the court denied her petition. Just like that. She was stuck in this bizarre legal no man's land, officially divorced in Japan, but somehow still married in the Philippines. Wait, why? Why on earth would the court say no? To really get that, we need to dive into the specific, old-school legal interpretation that created this whole situation in the first place. Okay, so the problem was a concept called the nationality principle. Think of it this way. Philippine family law is like a shadow that follows Filipino citizens no matter where they are in the world. And since there's no absolute divorce in the Philippines, the court's logic was pretty simple. You're Filipino, so you can't get a divorce recognized here, even if it was granted somewhere else. And this is where the law created this really bizarre and frankly unfair situation. Get this. Under the old rules, if the foreign spouse filed for the divorce, it was recognized in the Philippines. The Filipino partner could move on, remarry, no problem. But if the Filipino spouse filed for divorce, like Manalo did, nope, not recognized. It was a massive double standard. But thankfully, her story didn't end there. The case made its way all the way to the Supreme Court, and this is where things get really interesting. The justices decided to look past the literal words on the page and focus on the intention behind the law, its spirit. The Supreme Court basically said, hey, the whole point of this law was to prevent this exact kind of absurd situation. The goal was never to trap a Filipino in a one-sided marriage where their foreign ex-spouse is already single and has moved on. And they brought out the big guns, the Equal Protection Clause of the Constitution. They argued that it shouldn't matter who files the paperwork. A Filipino is in the same boat either way. Treating them differently just because of who initiated the divorce was, in the court's own words, arbitrary and whimsical. In other words, it just didn't make sense. And that powerful line of reasoning, well, it led to the moment everything changed. The Supreme Court overturned the lower court's decision and ruled decisively in favor of Marlon Manalo. The new rule was crystal clear. It no longer matters who starts the divorce. As long as a divorce is validly obtained abroad between a Filipino and a foreign spouse, it can be recognized in the Philippines. This was a monumental, game-changing shift. So what does this actually mean for people in real terms? It means the Filipino spouse can finally truly move on. They can legally remarry. They can go back to using their maiden name. They are no longer legally tied to a former spouse. It finally put an end to that absurd situation of a one-sided marriage. But hold on. Here's a critical twist to the story. The Supreme Court's landmark ruling in favor of Manalo, well, it wasn't the final step in her personal journey. There was still one more hurdle to clear. You might think, great. The Supreme Court ruled, so her records were automatically fixed, right? But no, that's not quite how it works. The ruling gave her the right to have her divorce recognized, but she still had to go through a specific legal process to make it official. So the ruling basically laid out a clear roadmap. First, you still need to file a petition in a Philippine court. Second, you have to provide the official divorce decree and prove it's the real deal. And third, and this part is critical, you have to prove the specific foreign law that allowed the divorce in the first place. A Philippine court can't just take your word for it. You have to prove that, say, Japanese law actually allows for divorce. You know,
The impact of the Manalo ruling goes so far beyond just one person's story. It sent massive ripples across the entire country and the whole global Filipino community. And to really get just how big a deal this was, you have to look at the history here. A lot of people don't realize this, but absolute divorce was actually legal in the Philippines once. But then, in 1950, it was prohibited. For nearly 70 years, that door was shut tight. The 2018 Manalo ruling didn't create a new divorce law for everyone, but it carved out a crucial, modern exception for Filipinos married to foreigners.
And get this ruling didn't just happen in a vacuum. The timing was incredible. In that very same year, 2018, the whole conversation about divorce was really heating up in the Philippines. The House of Representatives even passed a bill to legalize absolute divorce, with 134 lawmakers voting yes. Now, that bill didn't end up becoming law, but it just goes to show you that the court's decision was tapping into a huge national debate.
Which brings us to the big final question. The Manalo ruling fixed a glaring inequality for Filipinos married to foreigners, but it left the bigger issue completely untouched for Filipinos who are married to other Filipinos. So you have to wonder, is this a stepping stone toward an absolute divorce law for everyone in the Philippines, or is this as far as the law is going to go? That is the debate that continues today.